It seemed like just yesterday when we saw arguably the worst trade in NBA history go down. Well, the worst for the Nets, but for the Celtics, it was the greatest robbery that Danny Ainge has ever pulled off. That happened in 2013, and it's been a long time since then. Things have changed a lot, and it was a slow process, but the Nets gradually built their roster back up, and it finally looks like they've successfully recovered from that catastrophe. In this video, we're gonna go back in time and take a look at how the Nets managed to pull this off, and how they've actually rebuilt better than other teams who are still stuck in no man's land, despite starting from a much worse position. How's it going, folks? My name's Andy, and without further ado, let's get started. Let's go back to 2013. It's the offseason, a rather quiet one actually. The Miami Heat just came off winning the championship, and it seems like no team in the Eastern Conference stands a chance against them. The Boston Celtics were contenders in previous years, but by 2013, their core of stars was getting older. A severe ACL tear for Rajon Rondo became the story of the season, and it was clear that this roster cannot compete in the playoffs anymore, let alone against Miami. This essentially left the front office with two choices: keep the team the same and try again next year, or blow it up right now and try to get assets in return to hopefully build for a better future. Except, which team would actually be willing to give up assets for an old Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce, both of whom were clearly showing signs of age? That's where Billy King and the Brooklyn Nets swooped in. They also happened to have a roster that was quickly aging, and he wanted to compete for the title right now. He believed that by trading for KG, Pierce, and Jason Terry too, they'll have a real shot to win the title and beat Miami, which was the goal that all of them wanted to achieve. So the trade happened. This is what it looked like. The craziest part about this is not that they gave up so many picks, but the picks were unprotected. There were no top 5 protections or even top 3 protections, which nowadays it's very common to see, because no other teams want to risk losing so many high draft picks like the Nets did. Perhaps the crazier part is, so many people thought this was a terrible trade for the Celtics. I mean, look at all these reactions back in 2013. Most people did not understand how valuable these picks were gonna be. But I kinda get why people thought this way. We had no idea the Nets were gonna fall off so quickly after the trade, or that Pierce and KG would leave so quickly. Shortly after, they became bottom dwellers, winning about 20 games per season, hence why their picks became so high, and since the Celtics had them, it was all theirs. So anyway, what happened after this trade? Well, the Nets got destroyed by Miami in the second round of the 2014 playoffs. Then, Pierce was gone, and KG was gone shortly after. Still, with Darren and Joe Johnson, they still had some talent left. The Nets would barely sneak into the 2015 playoffs, but lost in the first round. After that, the rebuild began. It all started with Ronde Hollis Jefferson in the 2015 draft, who's no longer on the team but played a tremendous role in helping the Nets get back on track. The Nets struck a deal with the Blazers, sending them Mason Plumlee for his draft rights. Ronde wasn't a star or anything like that, but he was always a great teammate and a player who really did want to turn the franchise around. He helped change the culture and led the way for all the young players joining the team. The next important acquisition happened a few months later. In February of 2016, Sean Marx was named as the Nets' new GM. He's not a man of many words, but in his press release, this is what he said. "I would like to thank Nets ownership for giving me this opportunity, and I look forward to the challenge of creating a unified culture and building a winning team." And creating that, he did. 2016 was a very important year for multiple reasons. Among all the headlines of the Warriors breaking 73 wins and Kevin Durant joining them over the summer, nobody paid attention to the progress the Nets were making. They had no first-round picks in the 2016 draft, but they were still able to snag Caris LeVert, the 20th pick, in exchange for Thaddeus Young. LeVert would go on to become a fantastic player, a cornerstone for the Nets franchise. Perhaps even good enough to be thrown into a trade package to acquire a superstar. A few weeks later, they signed Joe Harris, a guy who wasn't given much playing time at all before coming to Brooklyn. The only thing the Nets knew was that he was young and he was a good shooter, and they needed some floor spacing around Brook Lopez. Harris is now one of the best shooters in the league, all because he had the chance to play in Brooklyn. Sean Marks was also willing to take on bad players and bad contracts, as long as he's also able to get a pick along with it. It was turning into a very aggressive rebuild, but it was working. The signing of Kenny Atkinson as the head coach was also a key factor in the development of this young squad. While he did get fired in 2020 after a series of frustrating losses, there's no question that he helped a lot of youngsters develop, simply by giving them minutes and touches. Furthermore, in late 2016, the Nets signed another player who became a significant member of the team, Spencer Dinwiddie. Just like Joe Harris, Dinwiddie rarely got playing time previously, but developed into a 20 points per game scorer and a very solid, respectable point guard. So now, the Nets were rolling and things kept getting better. In the 2017 draft, they had a pick that they acquired previously from the Wizards and used it to select Jarrett Allen at number 22, another major player. But the biggest transaction they made this offseason was trading away Brook Lopez and Kyle Kuzma's draft rights to the Lakers for D'Angelo Russell. Russell was amazing in Brooklyn, making his first ever All-Star appearance and leading the Nets to the playoffs 1 year later. However, he didn't stay for long. Shortly after the 2019 playoffs, he was packaged in a sign and trade to acquire Kevin Durant. Also, both Kyrie Irving and DeAndre Jordan signed with the Nets as free agents 1 day earlier, so the Nets had probably the greatest 2-day stretch in history. Acquiring KD, Kyrie, and Jordan in a single offseason is ridiculous. They somehow pulled it off. I know there are some people who argue that they just got lucky because those players wanted to go there anyway. While that is kinda true, it doesn't tell the whole story. The Nets put themselves in the position to be able to acquire them in the first place. They were saving cap space specifically to sign some players in the 2019 offseason. And they traded so many players for picks and other assets to entice other teams in a deal. Other players, other teams witnessed this incredible rebuild the Nets went through and really liked what the front office was doing. This led to other players wanting to join them because they're now considered one of the better organizations in the league. Initially, people were confused on why Kevin Durant chose the Nets out of all teams. For a while, we actually thought him and Kyrie were going to the Knicks. He was asked about this and responded, "If I was leaving the Warriors, it was always going to be for the Nets. They got the pieces and the creative front office. I just like what they were building." One thing leads to another, and now they've got multiple superstars and a real shot to contend for the championship. That's insane to see them mortgage what looked like to be their entire future and then turning it around so quickly. It's a magnificent sight to see. In fact, they've only missed the playoffs for 3 seasons since that trade, so it wasn't even that bad. However, with the recent blockbuster James Harden trade, the Nets made it very clear that they're ready to go all in once again. They traded away 2 guys who've been building blocks for their rebuild, Allen and LeVert. In addition to sending the Rockets 4 unprotected first-round picks along with 4 unprotected pick swaps. That's a massive package they sent away. And on one hand, the Nets are looking freaking amazing right now. On the other hand, I can't help but think this is risky. They sent away way too much. They sent away more picks than they did in the trade from 2013. And all of them are, once again, unprotected. it does make me nervous. Of course, Harden, KD, and Kyrie are not as old as KG, Pierce, and Terry from back then, but they aren't exactly young either. The Nets have a small window to contend, but from the looks of it, they sure can. Anyway, that's all, folks. For a team that looked like they were dead in the water, they rebuilt much quicker than we anticipated. It was a story of a trade gone horribly wrong, but through thick and thin, the Nets put their head down and continued to work. But when they saw a chance to create a super team, they took it, and they put those assets and picks to good use. Will it be worth it? Thank you all so much for watching. I hope y'all enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts on the Nets and where do you see them going from here? Do you see them winning the title in the upcoming years? Let me know in the comments, and as always, I'll see you next time. Peace.